Okay, year 11, finally I've been able to make a video for you guys. Let's have a quick look at paper 2. Remember section B, which is quite a big unit, changing UK economy. Now the focus of today quick video is that we're going to quickly look at, it's the last lesson in the booklet where he looked at the UK's place in the wider world, but this one's more with the EU and obviously a bit of the Commonwealth, but mainly the EU. So I want you to very quickly understand, remember we were once part of the EU, the European Union. That was a list of 20, that was a group of 28 countries. And what was it? It was actually a partnership, okay, economically and politically. But remember, we have left the EU. And remember this whole idea of Brexit, you know, you've heard all about it. But you need to understand how has that changed the UK's position? How has that changed the UK's position in the world? So when it says wider world, don't be confused by that. It's just like, you know, how has it changed now politically and economically? So I'm going to run through a list of reasons. Okay, let's have a look at them. Okay, so important that you understand that because we've now left the EU, how does that impact us? And economically, it 100% does. And you guys are actual evidence. Like you see it in your supermarkets. Okay, and I'll go through what it means. You know, we used to trade with the EU a lot, yeah. And being part of the EU meant we were part of this something called the singles market. Singles market meant that we didn't have to pay any tariffs or taxes. We could trade freely with these 28 countries. But remember, you're going to be able to kind of like explain and say because we've left it, it means that UK now trading is more expensive with imports and exports. Okay, they were once able to trade freely because they were part of this market, but now the impact, if I was to quickly summarize it, well, actually it has had a negative impact on the economy. You know, lots of costs have gone up for lots of industries. You know, also UK consumers are now having to pay more for, let's say, their goods, and that has a negative impact, you could argue. You can look at the booklet on page 32 and it says all these ideas, but now we have to twist it in terms of like how we say it. Because remember, we read that the EU really helped British industries. So this is another point, you know, they gave money, they gave grants to fishing and farming industries in the UK. But now we're going to argue that, you know, many of these industries may now struggle. So economically, the UK's position changes again because many of these industries don't have these funds, which helps them with, let's say, rising costs. But what's the impact? Because they've left the EU, these industries may struggle and therefore increase costs, and therefore obviously now, let's say, dairy products and things may increase in the UK. Now that has a negative impact, let's say, when it comes to trading or whether there's anyone that wants to invest within the UK, because generally remember that there's been a negative impact of leaving the EU. You know, not everyone may want to invest, and especially with industries like these struggling a lot. It's not all negative. So the third point, you could argue that actually because we've left the EU, there are some kind of positives to another extent. So you could argue that we know we've gained better control of our borders now, okay, and a bit of money. Let's go through what this means. You know, some people may argue that Brexit will help the UK take better control of its borders. So my first kind of positive thing is that, remember, being part of the EU meant that there was a lot of free movement for migrants, skilled workers. They could easily, you know, enter the UK from many countries, and that increased migration obviously, but it increased pressures in the UK, let's say housing and other areas. Lots of people who wanted Brexit, you know, do you remember when they said they wanted better control of our borders? So again, you could argue that now, however, leaving the EU has meant that UK can now control its borders, reducing migration and other pressures in different sectors. And again, remember, I don't know if you remember this, but you could also argue that, you know, it cost a lot of money, like let's say an amount. I don't know how much it was every day, but it costed a lot to be a part of the EU, guys. Okay, and now you could argue that because that money is now saved, that could be now used elsewhere, such as the NHS, or actually we could just use that money to have better trade deals with other countries outside of EU, such as the USA, or amongst Commonwealth countries, because obviously there are a list about 56 countries in the Commonwealth. So these are your main reasons, okay? Try and do this question as a 6 marker or a 9 marker. Think about how you might talk about the EU and how leaving the EU, has it changed the UK's stance economically, politically, you know, around the world.